take 4 graduate courses as an undergrad, that counts both for your undergraduate degree and for your master's. So you actually get the 2 degrees with 12 less credits than you would if you'd taken them separately. And that allows you to start taking classes earlier as an undergrad with undergrad financial aid. And those graduate courses are applied to your graduate degree. One thing you can't do, I think, anywhere is take a class as an undergrad, graduate, come back 10 years later, and ask it to be applied to both your undergraduate degree and your graduate degree.
How do you? There are 500 level courses that you can take during your undergrad. This is outside of the 4+1.
Right.
There are 500 level courses that you can take which would apply to grad. I don't know if the counseling program has any 500 level courses or not.
But the graduate program that you are matriculating into has to agree to take as a transfer anything that was prior. So you can't assume they're going to take it.
You need to talk to the program. Counseling, it does have courses that for the right student that will open to undergraduates. We have one student now taking a 500 level course. The OT program is another program that doesn't address Mindy's specific case, but the OT program has a jump start, so that you are still an undergraduate financial aid while you can start in the program. And we're trying to develop some other programs too.
As well. MSW, like,
but you need to still be matriculated as an undergraduate, and that's might be it.
Yeah, to receive financial aid, you have to be matriculated.
So I couldn't have my degree, a bachelor's degree, and
Right, but if you postpone applying for your graduation, while you take those last 2, you haven't completed the requirement. You don't automatically graduate. You have to apply to graduate.
Right.
So if you delay that applying to graduate while you take 2 more courses in an additional semester.
And I have a caveat to that because I've had students. If you have to make sure that the very last class you take finishes your degree. So if in May you take the class that finishes your degree and you take 2 classes in the fall, they will catch up to you. You might get your money, but eventually they're going to find out that you actually finished your degree in May and you will not get financial aid. It will get rescinded. So what you would want to do is make sure that a course that is required by your degree is at least part of what you do that final semester. So you would probably want to split it up. If you were going to take 2 graduate courses, you would take one in the spring, and then in the fall take the second one with that very last class you need to graduate. You cannot have it be after you've completed all of the requirements. Otherwise, it'll come back and bite you in the butt.
But if you're in a formal program that combines, then you're
right. If the 4+1 is different.
And when you're talking about a graduate program, you're talking about a 500 level.
Correct.
Class.
Correct.
How would you approach that, like with the application to taking the graduate classes?
There's a spot on the application that asks for transfer, and you would just list those courses.
And again, make sure it's up to the individual graduate program whether or not they're going to let that happen. So actually writing a letter to the Dean of Graduate Studies isn't going to help you. What's going to help you is speaking to the director of that graduate program.
Because some have in writing. They literally will have in writing. So when Lisa says do research, some of those programs have right in their writing any graduate courses you took as a requirement of your undergrad or that you used to supplement your undergrad, they won't accept.
Right.
I would also say it can be wise to take a couple of courses as a non-matriculated student if you have reason to believe that it may be tricky for you to gain acceptance into a graduate school. By doing that, by getting a couple of A's in those courses, you're not going to really, it doesn't affect your GPA, of course, but it shows the admissions people that you're able to do quality work in their program.
Yep.
So if for any reason you think you might be sort of bordering on the edge, rather than apply, take a couple of courses as a non-matric.
And USM has certificates of graduate study, and they're all included on the back side here. There are a few that are missing. I'm just doing a reprint now to fix those, but or they've been added recently. And those are nice tools in order to, again, get those classes as a non-matric, boost your GPA, indicate to the program that you can succeed at the graduate level. So that's another avenue you might want to pursue. Again, the financial aid, though, is always a concern because those are not eligible for financial aid.
And you have to great thing. So this is a great time for, actually, I was just asking other questions before this last person left, what might be there. And for her, was that timing issue. So we just opened up some really interesting material in terms of timing, in terms of taking courses, graduating, and applying. So it can be a little overwhelming, but maybe we should step back a little bit and think about other questions or interests you have, because sometimes the details, you have to think about them and pick those bright lines for when they're critical decision points. But just your thoughts about graduate school, what motivates people, or what questions do you have in mind?
Can I add one thing about your transcripts?
Yeah.
Some people think that they are not eligible for graduate school, talking about being competitive for a graduate program, if they have a lower GPA than others. Some programs, like leadership studies, if they're familiar with people who, tanked their freshman year in college when they were 18 and then come back as a mature adult and do very well. So, for example, I might have somebody, I'll use George because he's sitting here, and this is not true. George, really tanked. He was out partying his freshman year. He didn't do much anything.
Not wholly accurate.
Okay. So his freshman year GPA is pretty low, and that brings down his overall GPA. If it brought it down to a point that it would disqualify him from being considered to even interview for the graduate program, we have a rule that we then look at the last 30 credits of study. And so if in the last 30 credits of study you have a 3.0 or better, you will make it through that hoop. So some programs do that and some don't. You have to look at the individual program.
And I will add to that I always recommend that folks, instead of just assuming they'll know you tanked your year because you were out partying, to include an addendum to your application that essentially highlights the problem. You name it, you direct them to where you've done well, and you move on. So it's a short addendum to your application. I had an applicant say, well, I assumed they would just look and know I did horribly my first year, and then I did, well, you can't really assume anything. So it's always good to include that. Let them know what was going on in that year, people understand your first year away from college, from home, and adjusting to college life and things like that. Or if it's your sophomore year or junior year and you've had a horrible tragedy, just to be able to name it, point to where you've done well, and move on. One other point that I want to make, and this was not clear earlier, that your undergraduate degree does not have to be in the same area of study of your master's degree. Many programs will accept you into their programs with a different undergraduate degree. Some might require some foundation courses or prereqs that you take within the first year, but you don't have to have that undergraduate degree in the same area.
I want to follow up on that, because that's very important. Just as with all of LAC's majors, which are interdisciplinary, and LOS, and definitely SBS, for sure in particular, people have gone to many different kinds of graduate programs. Not only has employment gone in different directions, just with the bachelor's. We've had people go to divinity school, law school, public policy, counseling, psychology, family studies, social work, of course, teacher ed. There are many different directions. And that's another thing about your education at LA, so you've been doing another little plug, but it's true. The diversity of experiences that you have brought. We have people who come in when they're 17 and a half and graduate when they're 21, but that's not the majority. Just look around the room, that's not the majority, right? You have diverse life experiences and have been in different settings. And sometimes it's daunting to think about graduate school in terms of right out of the chute. But once you make that leap, what we find is people do very well. You're getting a lot of emphasis on writing here. That's important. You're used to speaking and participating, being an active learner. That's important. and you have the life experience to make good use of graduate education. So, don't get nervous about comparing yourself with someone who's gone straight through 4 years of college and is ready out the chute. You'll get a lot out of it in many different directions, and I really want to reinforce that. So, psychology, yes, social sciences of sorts, but they get divinity, law, and the LOS, masters, occupational therapy. I mean, just a lot of different programs, and I believe we've got some of those on our website, the SBS website, where people have gone as well as the work they've done.
Can we have the graduate students talk?
Yes, let's talk some more about either application or what it's like being a graduate student. I think for some people, maybe sitting and wondering, what is graduate school?
Well, I wanted to piggyback what you two said, because remember when Tara said it was important to tie in how that degree is going to help you in your future? If you're coming from a degree and not going into the same field, my background, I graduated with a Natural Applied Science degree and I went into adult and higher ed. They kind of wanted to know, not kind of, they did. In my interview, they wanted to know what was the correlation, why was I doing this? And then when I explained it, it made perfect sense to them. But until they had heard it from me, but again, I was lucky enough to have an interview. If you're not in a program that has an interview, you've got to make that connection for them in your essay. Because if it looks, again, if you, like Carol was saying, if they're looking at hundreds of applications and for some reason you haven't told them why and it looks like a mismatch, you're probably going in the second pile. You're not going to be in the first pile.
And I would caution you, even if the program has an interview, you need to
emphasize, graduate schools have a limited number of spots, and it is expensive to train people. I mean, you think the tuition is expensive, it's more expensive to train people. And they are looking for a sense that you will be successful. They do not want to accept people who seem to have applied on a whim. They want you to have done your homework so that it's a good match, so that you'll get through successfully. So they want you to succeed, because it's costly on both sides to take in people who are then going to drop out or not succeed. So the whole point of this is to select the candidates that they feel are most likely to succeed and do well and thrive in the profession. And that, so when you give an impression of not having done your homework, everything you do is creating an impression. Asking questions gives an impression of self-starter. Asking questions that really indicate that you didn't even think before you opened your mouth or you didn't look at the website, not helpful. But any sense that you can give them that this is a good match, you've thought about it, you've done your homework, and you have what it takes to get through, that's going to put you in that first pile rather than second. And asking for how can I strengthen my application in the future, whether it's for that program or for another program you apply to, most of the time you will get somebody willing to answer that for you.
We've got Megan, who's been accepted to the MSW program, George, who is in the MLS program, Jolene is in the midst of ultimate higher education. We just heard from Lynn. Anybody else who's currently in a program or been accepted?
I would say, about the application process, I applied as an international student, so it's very different, and Lisa explained, I guess, everything perfectly. What I had to go through is a little different. I would say from the outside looking in, quite literally I suppose, being English, that it's important to tick the boxes, obviously. We're in a university, it's an academic institution. I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, but I think people like boxes ticked. It's important to remember that process whilst you're going through the process. I think it's also important, and this links a little bit to what everyone's kind of saying, to create almost kind of your own boxes, and it goes a little bit towards selling yourself and thinking about things that you can offer that might not necessarily be immediately determinable, if you like, by the linear process that you see in front of you that might seem a little bit overwhelming to start with. I would agree that you have to go through that process and do that, but I wouldn't be afraid to think about ways that you can promote yourself outside of that process, if that makes sense.
And this is George's second master's degree, so
that's correct.
He's done the process successfully.
Yeah.
I had a question probably for the students. What's the workload like compared to like undergraduate?
Very different. This is my first semester, So I had a reality check this semester. So really talk to the people in those programs. The director of my program, I work a 40-hour job. I have a personal business outside of my 40-hour job, and I was determined